Hello everyone and welcome to Whispering Reapers. Today I have 10 terrifying true stories that will send a chill down your spine and keep you up at night questioning what lurks just beyond the boundaries of our normal lives. Each of these accounts comes from people who swear the horror they experienced was real. Let's get right into it. Story 1, The House in the Woods. They say old houses keep secrets, and sometimes those secrets are better left undiscovered. A man named Samuel learned this the hard way when he decided to move into a long-forgotten family home deep in the woods of upstate New York. He inherited the property from a great-uncle he barely remembered meeting. The exterior was dark gray, overgrown by tangled vines and flanked by towering pines. Inside, dust-coated furniture hinted at a life once lived there decades ago. Despite the layers of dust and the creaking floors, Samuel felt an almost magnetic pull to stay. Shortly after settling in, he started hearing faint voices at night. They weren't loud, just murmurs that seemed to drift down the narrow hallway connecting the living room to the kitchen. He'd check each corner, flashlight in hand, only to find moth-eaten wallpaper and nothing else. Sometimes, if he listened closely enough, he detected what sounded like distant sobbing. He told himself it was just the wind, or perhaps birds roosting in the attic. But the uneasy feeling wouldn't leave him. His first real encounter happened a week in. He returned from a grocery run, stepped into the foyer and froze. On the hardwood floor was a single muddy footprint. It was smaller than his own and angled as though whoever left it had been standing still, facing the living room. Discounting burglars, he searched every room. The house was empty. Later that night, he awoke to scraping sounds behind the walls of his bedroom, as if something with sharp nails was crawling through the paneling. He pounded on the wall, shouting for it to stop, and the noise halted instantly. Desperate to figure out what was going on, he called a local historian who specialized in old properties. She told him a disturbing story. Decades earlier, a mother and her young daughter had lived in that very house. Tragedy struck when the daughter drowned in a nearby pond under suspicious circumstances. Local rumors pointed at the mother. Some believed she'd gone mad with grief and taken her own life in the house. Others claimed the mother vanished into the woods, never to be seen again. Records were vague at best, but many who visited reported hearing voices, and some claimed to see a figure by the window on stormy nights. That night, as thunder rattled the windows, Samuel saw the silhouette of a small child near the fireplace. It was no more than a flicker, but it was distinct enough to jolt him out of his seat. He sprang forward to check, and the figure evaporated into thin air. He sat in the darkness, heart pounding, wondering if he was losing his mind or if the tortured spirits of a tragic past still lingered. The next day, he found more footprints leading toward the back door, this time accompanied by shallow scratches in the wooden boards. As the weeks wore on, the activity escalated. Lights would flicker. Doors would slam on their own. He'd wake up certain someone was standing at the foot of his bed, only to find empty space when he switched on the lamp. One early morning, he discovered water pooled in the hallway, dripping as if from wet clothes. It trailed into the living room, then vanished. Worst of all were the voices. They had grown louder, sounding frantic, scared, always echoing down the same corridor. Some nights he heard an older voice calling a name he couldn't make out. Other nights it was the quiet sob of a child. Unwilling to abandon the one property he owned, Samuel tried to communicate. He placed an old doll he found in the attic on the living room floor, thinking maybe he could calm the spirit of the missing child. He waited in the dark, listening. At first there was nothing but the incessant tick of the grandfather clock. Then the doll moved. It wasn't a dramatic shift, just a half-turn, as if something had nudged it. Moments later, the child's voice echoed, soft and pained. Samuel's heart nearly stopped. He asked aloud what she wanted. A faint whisper cut through the silence. "Help." He felt compelled to follow the footprints whenever they appeared, hoping maybe he could free the tragic soul. One day, the trail led him into the backyard, down a slope, and toward the pond on the edge of the property. There, beneath a large oak, he found a small wooden cross, half buried in the mud. It bore the initial of the little girl's name, which was partially worn away. As he knelt to brush off the moss, he heard a splash. When he turned, a pale figure stood waist-deep in the pond. It looked like a small child, her hair dripping, her features blurred by the haze. They locked gazes for an agonizing moment before the figure sank beneath the water. Samuel's scream tore through the still air. Convinced the child's spirit was tied to the tragedy at the pond, he placed flowers at the grave marker and said a simple prayer. That night, for the first time, the house felt calmer. The next morning, the footprints were gone and the corridor was silent. It wasn't a perfect peace. Doors still creaked and sometimes lights flickered, but the harrowing presence had lessened. Whether the mother's spirit still roamed, he never found out, but the small voice no longer cried for help. To this day, Samuel remains uncertain if he truly set the child's soul at rest, or if she's merely grown quiet, content to linger in the shadows. He still lives in that creaking house at the edge of the woods. On stormy nights, he sometimes imagines seeing a child's reflection in the pond, staring back at him under the glow of the moon. He prays that whatever ties her to the water has been broken, that she's found a piece of peace at last. Story 2, The Faceless Guide. Story 2, The Faceless Guide. During one sweltering summer, a woman named Vanessa decided to take a solo camping trip in the Mojave Desert. She was convinced it was the perfect place for solitude and introspection, with miles of sand and rocky terrain that glimmered in the scorching heat. She set up camp near an outcrop of jagged boulders, pitched a small tent, and prepared to enjoy a few days under the blazing sun. The first day passed uneventfully, though the relentless heat made her question her choice. But she loved the isolation. That night, as she lay in her tent, she heard an odd noise outside. It wasn't the wind, it sounded almost like footsteps crunching loosely over the gravel. Then came a delicate tinkling, as if someone were tapping small stones together. Unable to sleep, she unzipped her tent and peered out, shining a flashlight over the rocks. Nothing. The next day, she ventured farther into the desert, hoping to hike into less traveled reaches. She carried plenty of water and a map. Along the way, she felt a strange sensation of being watched. Twice she looked over her shoulder, certain someone or something was tracking her. All she found was the unbroken desert plain. When she reached a narrow canyon, the temperature seemed to drop a few degrees. Despite the midday sun, a sudden chill ran up her arms. She jokingly muttered to herself that maybe old spirits were haunting the place. She had heard the desert had plenty of odd lore, from ghost lights to mysterious robed figures wandering the dunes. As twilight set, Vanessa made her way back toward camp. She spotted a person standing near a tall mound of stones about 100 yards away. It looked like a man draped in pale, dusty clothing, standing very still. Relieved to see another soul out there, she waved. The figure didn't move. She called out a greeting. No response. A prickly sensation crawled over her skin. She suddenly felt it might be wiser to avoid them. She took a wide arc and returned to camp, feeling unnerved. That night, she found it impossible to sleep. A sense of dread tugged at her mind. Around midnight, the footsteps returned, circling her tent with deliberate slowness. Fear paralyzed her. She wanted to confront whoever it was, but felt a menacing energy in the air. She held her breath as the crunching steps approached the tent flap, paused for a few agonizing seconds, then receded into the distance. In the morning, she unzipped the tent and discovered footprints all around, but they weren't typical footprints. They were elongated, as if stretched, and the prints overlapped in an odd pattern. She noted that they seemed too large to be from a normal human shoe. Disturbed but determined to find answers, she set off in the direction she thought the intruder might have gone. She spent the day hiking deeper into the rocky terrain until she stumbled upon a natural rock shelter. The temperature dropped again, and the wind kicked up a dusty whirlwind. Inside that shallow cave were old markings on the walls, pictographs left by an ancient people. Strange shapes of human figures, some with elongated arms or blank faces. Many depicted what looked like a faceless being leading travelers. Her heart pounded, remembering the strange figure from earlier. Could these symbols represent the same entity? As evening approached, she realized she had stayed out too long. The sky was already turning an orange hue. She hurried back across the desert, but the sun dipped below the horizon faster than she expected. The landscape grew dark, contoured in shadows. She became disoriented, unsure if she was following the right path. Anxiety rose with every passing minute. Then she saw him again, the same pale figure standing on a low ridge. This time the figure lifted an arm and beckoned her forward as if offering to guide her. Fear gripped her, but she was lost, and night had fallen. Summoning her courage, she climbed the ridge to approach the stranger. When she got closer, her flashlight revealed something appalling. The figure wore tattered, colorless clothing, but its face was completely blank. There were no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just smooth flesh. She wanted to scream, but the sight left her voiceless. Slowly, the figure turned and walked, gesturing for her to follow. She hesitated. This thing, whatever it was, seemed unnatural, possibly malevolent. Yet she needed help. She followed at a cautious distance. For nearly an hour, it led her through the darkness, over rocky inclines and sandy flats, until at last her camp appeared in the flashlight's beam. When she looked up again, the faceless guide was gone, vanished into the desert night. Shaken, she hurried into her tent and desperately waited for sunrise. She left at first light. Even though it saved her from wandering aimlessly in the desert, she couldn't dismiss that the being she'd encountered was disturbingly inhuman. She later researched local legends and discovered centuries-old stories of a faceless spirit that roamed the Mojave, sometimes helping travelers, sometimes leading them to doom. No one had concrete answers. Vanessa has never completely processed what she experienced. She wonders if she encountered a benevolent desert guardian, or if she just got lucky. Some nights, she dreams of that blank face, features smoothed away, standing silently in front of ancient symbols. She hasn't been back to the Mojave since. Even now, when she steps outside on a moonlit night, she swears she can hear the crunch of gravel, footsteps that don't quite match anything human. When Mark and Tara bought their first home, they were thrilled. It was a semi-fixer-upper in a quiet Pennsylvania suburb. It had 2 stories, a big yard, and a spacious basement perfect for storing Mark's hobby gear. While cleaning out the basement, they discovered an antique mirror leaning against the wall. It had a thick wooden frame with intricate carvings, blackened with age. They thought it was a cool find, so they kept it. As soon as the mirror arrived upstairs, bizarre things started happening. At first it was minor doors slowly swinging open, lights flickering and cold spots, especially near the basement stairs. They chalked it up to the old wiring or drafts. But one night, Tara woke up certain she heard laughter down in the living room. Soft, childlike giggles. Mark went to check, but the room was empty. The next morning they found the TV on with static, though both swore it had been off before bed. Over the next few weeks, each noticed fleeting movements in the mirror's reflection that weren't actually happening in the room. Mark caught a glimpse of someone walking behind him, but when he turned, there was nobody there. Tara swore she saw a hand wave from the mirror, though her own hands were at her sides. They began feeling uneasy, as if someone else occupied their space. Late one evening, Mark was dozing on the couch. The mirror stood in a corner, angled so he could see most of the living room's reflection. Suddenly he saw a woman's face in the glass. She was pale, with dark hair, and an unsettling grin that stretched unnaturally wide. He jolted upright, certain it was Tara, but Tara was upstairs, fast asleep. When he looked at the mirror again, it showed only his reflection. He tried to dismiss it as a trick of the eyes, but the nightmares started soon after. Both he and Tara dreamed of the same woman lurking in shadows, sometimes reaching out to them. On one occasion, Tara jolted awake, screaming about someone grabbing her ankles. She could still feel the icy grip. The next day, bruises appeared around her ankles in the shape of long, thin fingers. Fearing an intruder or some rational explanation, they installed cameras. For 3 nights, the footage was typical empty rooms, the occasional flicker of headlights outside. But on the 4th night, around 3 a.m., the camera in the living room captured something chilling. The mirror's surface seemed to ripple like water disturbed by a pebble. Then a faint silhouette turned toward the camera and vanished. The rest of the video was normal. Mark showed the footage to a friend who specialized in editing. The friend confirmed there was no sign of digital tampering or glitching. Disturbed, Mark and Tara decided to move the mirror back to the basement, hoping to minimize whatever was happening. That's when the basement lights stopped working entirely. No matter how many times they replaced the bulbs or checked the wiring, the basement remained steeped in darkness. Each time Mark tried to carry the mirror out of the house entirely, he was overcome by intense nausea and migraines, forcing him to stop. It felt as though the mirror refused to leave. Tara tried covering it with a heavy cloth. That night they heard violent banging from the basement as if something was furious. In the morning they found the cloth shredded on the floor and the mirror uncovered. A small crack had appeared in the corner of the glass. Mark peered at the crack, noticing it resembled a spider web. At the center, if he squinted, he thought he could see the outline of a face. Unable to handle the chaos, they reached out to a local paranormal investigator. She believed the mirror might be a portal or a vessel haunted by a hostile entity. She attempted a cleansing ritual in the basement, chanting words Mark didn't recognize. The house pulsed with cold air, and the mirror's surface vibrated. Midway through the ritual, they heard a piercing shriek. The investigator dropped the item she was holding. Then the mirror shattered from the inside, sending shards onto the floor. In that instant, everything went deathly silent. The basement lights flickered back to life. Shaken, they swept up the broken glass, disposing of it in a trash bin outside. The investigator suggested burying the pieces far from the property, but Mark and Tara just wanted it all gone. They never checked if all the shards were accounted for. In the chaos, some could have lodged elsewhere. From that night on, the house returned to normal. No more laughter, no more cold spots, no mysteriously turning electronics. They refused to discuss the incident publicly. Even now, though, Tara confesses that sometimes, when she's cooking or doing laundry, the reflection in the window or the steel faucet surface momentarily flashes that same wide grin. She tells herself it's her imagination, that the mirror is gone, but a corner of her mind wonders if by destroying the mirror's surface they merely set something free. Carlos had always been a night owl, often driving home late after finishing shift work at a warehouse in rural Texas. The roads were typically empty at 2 or 3 in the morning, just him and miles of dark highway under a star-studded sky. One Saturday night, everything changed. He was about 30 minutes from home when he spotted a figure on the roadside, illuminated in his headlights. It looked like a young woman in a white dress, standing alone. Concerned she might need help, he pulled over and rolled down the passenger window. The woman approached the car with a slow, halting gait that struck him as odd. Her face was partially in shadow, but he saw tears glistening on her cheeks. He asked if she was all right. Woman, she simply whispered that she needed a ride home. Feeling uneasy but unable to leave her there, he unlocked the door. She settled in the passenger seat, still weeping. He asked her where she lived. Her only response was a half-muttered street name, the same street as the local cemetery. An icy shiver ran through him, but he didn't want to show fear. He nodded, turned the car around and headed toward that direction. Silence filled the car. He tried to engage her in conversation, but she remained mostly mute, except for the occasional sniffle. At one point, he glanced over and noticed her face was unnaturally pale, her lips nearly colorless. He asked if she needed medical help. She turned her head slowly, meeting his gaze with eyes that sparkled oddly in the glow of the dashboard, and whispered no. Something about her voice made the hairs on his neck stand up. As they neared the turnoff for the cemetery, the woman pointed a trembling finger. He followed her direction down an old gravel road lined with leaning tombstones. The darkness felt oppressive. At the end of the lane, under a gnarled tree, she asked him to stop. With shaky hands, he put the car in park. Before he could say anything, she opened the door and stepped out. He hurried after her, calling for her to wait. In the faint moonlight, he saw her walk around a row of headstones. Then she vanished. One moment there, the next moment gone. The only sound was the rustling of leaves overhead. Shaken, he circled the area, shining his phone's flashlight. No footprints, no sign of a white dress, nothing. Confused and spooked, he returned to his car. That's when he saw it. On the passenger seat was a single wilting rose, droplets of water clinging to the petals. He hadn't noticed her carrying any flower. Shuddering, he placed it outside the car, got in and sped away. In the days that followed, Carlos couldn't shake the experience. He told a co-worker who suggested he check local law. A quick search unearthed stories of a young woman said to haunt the roads leading to the cemetery. Legend had it she'd been in a car accident decades ago while heading to her wedding dressed in white. Some claimed she roamed the streets at night looking for a ride that would finally take her home. Official records were scarce, but the rumor persisted. Despite the terror he felt, Carlos returned to the cemetery the next weekend, hoping to find a rational explanation. He brought flowers, unsure why, maybe as an offering. As he stood under the same tree, he felt an overwhelming sorrow, and tears pricked his eyes with no clear reason. It was as if grief radiated from the spot. Placing the flowers by a long-forgotten headstone, he whispered a quiet prayer. He never saw the hitchhiker again, but occasionally late at night, while driving, he glimpses a pale figure in his peripheral vision. By the time he turns to look, she's gone. The memory of her silent sadness haunts him. He can still see the tears on her cheek when she first approached his car. Every so often he wonders if he should have tried harder to help, or if he unwittingly gave a restless spirit another lonely ride into the darkness. When Mia relocated to Chicago for a new job, she found a cheap, older apartment building that seemed perfect for her budget. It had small rooms, outdated fixtures, and a less-than-ideal location near a busy intersection, but the price was right. She settled in quickly. Life was hectic, and she worked long hours, so she hardly spent time in the apartment anyway. One night she heard crying through the thin wall by her bedroom. It sounded like the desperate sobs of someone in deep anguish. Assuming it was a neighbor, she tried to ignore it. Over the next week, the crying became more frequent, often starting after midnight. She felt uneasy about it, but hoped the neighbor would find help. When she mentioned it to the building manager, he frowned and said, "The unit on that side, 203, was vacant." She asked him to check, suspecting maybe a homeless person had sneaked in. He opened 203 in her presence. The place was empty, dusty, with no signs of recent intrusion. Mia felt a knot of dread forming in her stomach. That night, the crying started again, louder than before. She pressed her ear to the wall. The voice sounded feminine, but there were also deeper undertones, like multiple voices overlapping. Her blood turned cold when she realized the sobs sometimes turned into low growls. The next morning, she mustered courage to ask around. A neighbor confided that years ago, a woman in 203 had a troubled life. Her husband was abusive, and one night, driven by desperation, she took her own life in the apartment. People rumored she still cried out for help. Some claimed the husband might have hidden more secrets there, fueling the building's ghostly reputation. Mia tried to brush it off as just another urban legend. However, the disturbances escalated. Lights in Mia's apartment flickered every night around 1 a.m. The crying pierced the silence, resonating through the walls. It began to affect her sleep. At times she swore she heard her own name whispered amid the sobs. One weekend, exhausted, she decided enough was enough. She planned to sleep meditating with headphones on, drowning out any noise, but the moment she dozed off, she felt the bed shake. She ripped off the headphones and saw a dark silhouette at the foot of her bed. It was faint, but it had a human-like form. She couldn't move, pinned by terror as the shadow drifted closer. Then it vanished, leaving behind an icy chill in the room. Mia reached out to an old family friend who practiced spiritual cleansing. He came with sage and prayers, trying to bless the apartment. As soon as he approached the shared wall, the crying erupted, reverberating so powerfully they felt vibrations under their feet. The overhead light burst with a loud pop, plunging the room into darkness. By candlelight, the friend said a prayer, smudging every corner with sage smoke. Slowly, the wailing subsided to a faint moan, then silence. For the next few days, things were calm. Mia began to relax, thinking maybe the spirit had moved on. But one evening, she heard a soft whimper again, right by the wall. This time, it wasn't prolonged or frantic. It was just one brief, sad moan. She felt a pang of sympathy, but also fear. That was the last time she ever heard it. As the months passed, no new tenants moved into 203, which remained dusty and locked. Mia eventually moved out of the building, scarred by nights of lost sleep, and the memory of that shadow looming at the foot of her bed. Sometimes, she wonders if that tortured soul in 203 continues to linger there, quietly crying in the dark for someone to acknowledge her suffering. When asked about it, the building manager quickly changes the subject, as if acknowledging the crying might conjure it once again. Mia, for her part, will never forget the feeling of pure dread whenever those sobs echoed at midnight, as if something was desperately reaching across the boundary of life and death. Jeremy got a part-time job unloading trucks at a shipping dock in New Orleans. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to keep him afloat. Most of the work happened at night to avoid the daytime heat. The dock was an old, rusted structure near the Mississippi River, with a labyrinth of containers stacked like looming giants. The first few nights were quiet. He and a couple of other workers would move crates, log inventory, and try to stay awake until sunrise. On his fourth night, something felt off. He heard a distant moaning echo between the shipping containers. Thinking someone was hurt, he followed the sound. It led him to a dimly lit area near storage container 517. He found no one but noticed a foul odor, like decaying fish. Over the next few shifts, the moaning continued, sometimes closer, sometimes further. One evening, he found greasy footprints around the same container. The prints led behind a stack of crates, but ended abruptly, leaving no sign of who or what made them. Frustrated and spooked, he told his co-worker, Leon. Leon laughed it off, but admitted there were rumors of odd happenings when big shipments from overseas came in. He heard stories of stowaways, smuggled animals, or worse. Determined to put his curiosity to rest, Jeremy asked a supervisor if he could take inventory around container 517. Under flickering overhead lights, he pried open the container doors. The interior was cramped with wooden crates. A pungent stench hit him in the face. He coughed, stepping carefully inside. As he inspected the crates, he heard a faint scraping noise from the back. He froze, heart pounding. He whispered a hello, but only silence followed. He inch by inch made his way deeper, shining a flashlight along the walls. That's when he saw something shift between two crates. It appeared humanoid but crouched low, spindly limbs twisted awkwardly. Before he could react, the figure scrambled deeper into the container. Alarmed, Jeremy backed out. He told Leon, who teased him about rats, but Jeremy couldn't shake the image he'd glimpsed. It was too large to be any rat, and the shape was all wrong. The next night, they had a major unload to deal with, so Jeremy tried to focus on work. Hours later, while taking a break, he noticed a flicker of movement by container 517 again. Gathering his nerve, he approached, wielding a heavy flashlight. He detected the shape again, hunched near the corner. This time it seemed to be trembling, making guttural sounds. Jeremy called out. The thing whipped around, revealing a gaunt, almost human face, but with sunken eyes and a mouth that seemed permanently twisted open. It made a wailing hiss as it scuttled away on all fours, disappearing behind another row of containers. Terrified, Jeremy ran to get Leon. Together they patrolled the dock, searching for any sign of the creature. They found nothing, though they did catch whiffs of that same rotten smell. Leon, now unnerved, suggested they keep quiet to avoid scaring the rest of the crew. The next couple of nights, Jeremy felt uneasy, scanning every shadow. Then, on a rainy evening, he heard shrieks echoing against the metal walls, a mix of pain and anger. He and two other workers armed themselves with flashlights and ventured out. They found a trail of filthy water leading to container 517 again. This time they heard frantic scratching inside. One co-worker unlocked it, pulling the doors open. What they found was horrifying deep scratch marks on the walls and metallic cargo crates that were partially pried open. The stench was unbearable. At the far corner, behind a half-toppled crate, lay a half-eaten deer carcass, wet from the rain and reeking. Jeremy nearly vomited. The creature was nowhere to be found, but it had clearly been hiding there, feeding on fresh kill. They slammed the container shut and reported it to the supervisor. The supervisor called security, but by the time they showed up, the container was empty of anything except the gore left behind. Security insisted it must be an animal that got in, maybe a large dog or coyote. But Jeremy knew what he saw was far from any regular wildlife. Over the coming weeks, sightings persisted of a strange figure skittering around the dock, always near container 517 or others from the same shipment. Some of the staff started refusing night shifts. Jeremy quit soon after, not wanting to risk another close encounter. Rumors spread that the cargo originated somewhere with a history of strange folklore. Some whispered the creature was no mere stowaway, but something more sinister, hitching a ride across the ocean. Officially, management dismissed the speculation as hysteria. Yet even after Jeremy left, he occasionally heard from old co-workers who claimed to see a hunched silhouette slinking through the shadows, accompanied by that gut-churning smell. Even the bravest refused to explore alone. The container yard had become a place of whispering shadows, overshadowed by a dark presence that might never truly leave. Years after finishing her nursing degree, Lily found a job in an older hospital on the outskirts of Detroit. The facility had earned a reputation for being haunted, partly due to its age and partly because it had a psychiatric wing that closed down in the 1970s. Lily was skeptical about ghosts, though sometimes the aged hallways felt unnaturally cold. One evening she was assigned the night shift, covering the ground floor near the old psych ward. Everything was routine until around 3 a.m. She was walking down a dim corridor heading to check on supplies when she noticed a figure at the far end. It appeared to be a woman in a hospital gown, shuffling slowly. Lily called out, concerned it might be a confused patient. The figure ignored her. Lily hurried closer, but the woman turned a corner, moving surprisingly fast despite the shuffling gait. When Lily rounded the corner, she found nothing but a locked door leading to the decommissioned psych wing. The woman had nowhere to go, yet she was gone. Lily reported it to security, who brushed it off, saying staff often reported sightings. They half-jokingly referred to her as the lost patient. Within a few weeks, Lily saw the woman again, always near the same corridor. She began to notice a pattern. Lights would flicker, and an odd hush fell over the hallway. Then the woman would appear, drifting as if in a daze. Lily tried talking softly, offering help, but the figure never responded. One night she was determined to get a better look. She crept behind her, footsteps echoing in the silent hospital, close enough to see matted hair and bruises on the woman's ankles. Her skin was pallid with dark circles under her eyes. Suddenly the woman spun around, revealing a face contorted in silent agony. Lily tripped backward in shock. By the time she regained her composure, the woman was gone. Curiosity consumed Lily. She delved into hospital records, uncovering that a young female patient named Rachel had been admitted decades prior for severe mental distress after surviving a traumatic incident. The notes suggested her condition deteriorated, culminating in a tragic accident within the psych ward. Officially, she died from self-inflicted harm, but rumors suggested staff negligence or worse. Some believed her spirit never left. Driven to give the restless spirit some peace, Lily began leaving small tokens in the corridor. Flowers, a candle, a note expressing sympathy, anything to show compassion. A few nights later, Lily experienced something different. As she walked the corridor, she felt a gentle breeze, though no windows were open. The lights dimmed but did not flicker. She glimpsed the woman again, standing under the single functioning overhead light. She seemed calmer, less agitated, as though acknowledging Lily's gesture. Then, seamlessly, the figure faded. For a time, the sightings ceased. Lily thought she had helped Rachel move on, but about 2 months later, an elderly patient reported seeing a strange woman skulking near the elevator. Lily rushed to see if it was the same spirit. She arrived in time to catch a fleeting glimpse of the woman stepping into the elevator. The doors slid shut, but the indicator lights didn't change floors. When Lily pried the doors open, the elevator was empty. That was the final moment Lily actually saw the ghost. She sensed that perhaps Rachel was still lingering, but less frequently active. Some nights, Lily walked that corridor feeling a slight chill and a sense of sorrow. She'd whisper a quiet prayer, hoping Rachel heard. Occasionally, other staff members mentioned seeing a faint figure in a hospital gown at odd hours. Lily simply nodded, telling them not to be afraid, that the spirit meant no harm. She remained at the hospital for several more years without further dramatic encounters. Even so, Lily could never fully shake the memory of that contorted face, the bruised ankles and the haunted look of a patient forever trapped in a loop of pain. She keeps a candle on her windowsill at home, believing if the spirit ever needs a light, it can find her. Part of her wonders if compassion alone can guide a lost soul to rest, or if some traumas refuse to be forgotten even in death. Darren worked overnight shifts in a small-town police dispatch center. Most calls were mundane: noise complaints, suspicious vehicles, minor incidents. Rarely did anything truly alarming happen, except on one peculiar night that changed everything he thought he knew about his job. Around 2 a.m., a call came through. All Darren heard was static at first, punctuated by faint breathing. He tried the standard greeting, but no one answered. Then a shaky voice broke the silence. "They're here, please help." Darren asked for a location. The line crackled. Then the call ended abruptly. Protocol required him to attempt a callback, but the line was disconnected. He checked the incoming call logs. The number displayed as unknown. Minutes later, the phone rang again, the same static, the same shaky breathing. The person repeated, "They're here." Then something incomprehensible. It sounded like a name or a plea. Darren tried to keep them talking, but the call ended again. He alerted the on-duty officer, who could do nothing without an address or a phone number. For the next hour, the calls kept coming at random intervals. Each time, the voice sounded more distressed. Darren caught garbled phrases like "under the floor" and "hands in the walls." Finally, near 3:30 in the morning, the voice came through clearer, accompanied by heavy gasps. Darren heard the caller say something about a house near the railroad tracks, though it was cut off by a burst of static. He quickly radioed an officer to check the area by the old railroad. The officer found nothing unusual. As Darren tried to gather more info, the calls stopped entirely. The next night, at the same time, the calls resumed. This time there was screaming in the background. The frantic voice shouted, "Get out of my head, and they're everywhere!" Darren felt powerless. He could only listen as the caller dissolved into terrified sobbing, then silence. Desperate, Darren researched incidents near the old railroad. He discovered a rundown house had been boarded up years ago, rumored to be used by squatters. Some local kids claimed it was haunted, but official records showed only a complaint about weird noises a few months back. No sign of any occupant. On a hunch, Darren asked an off-duty friend to drive by that address during the day. The friend reported the place was in ruins. No sign of life. That evening, Darren braced for more calls, but none came. He thought maybe it was over until 2 weeks later, just before his shift ended at dawn, the phone rang once more. The voice was weaker, raspier, as though running out of strength. It mumbled about lost souls and darkness, then the final words, "You can't help me now." The line cut, never to return. And that was it. Darren was left with no answers. Just the lingering sense that something horrific happened in that house, something that gave rise to tortured cries for help. He confided in a co-worker who had been in dispatch for years. She said every decade or so, a flurry of calls like this would come through, always from an unknown number referencing the same haunted location. Then they'd stop as suddenly as they started. To this day, Darren can't forget those calls. Late at night, he wonders if there truly was someone in need, or if he was interacting with a restless spirit locked in a perpetual loop of despair. The sense of guilt gnaws at him, that perhaps he failed to save a life, and yet he can't shake the feeling that no matter what he had done, certain horrors simply cannot be undone. He hopes never to hear that voice again. A group of college friends decided to rent a cabin on the shores of Lake Superior in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. They planned a laid-back weekend of barbecues, fishing, and stargazing. The cabin was rustic but cozy, with a clear view of the vast lake that almost felt like an ocean. When night fell, the wind would howl softly and the waves crashed against the rocky edge, creating a soothing lullaby. On the second night, while they relaxed around a bonfire, one friend, Kelly, pointed out a strange light near the shoreline. It flickered, like a lantern swaying in the breeze. Curious, they walked down to investigate. The night sky was clear, the stars bright, the water lapped gently. Yet as they approached, the light vanished. Dismissing it as a reflection or passing boat, they returned to the cabin. Later, Kelly woke up to use the restroom and looked out the window. There it was again, that floating light by the shoreline. This time she saw a figure holding it, someone in old-fashioned clothing, standing ankle-deep in the water. Kelly blinked, unsure if she was half dreaming. The figure turned, revealing a partial glimpse of a face racked with sorrow. Then the light disappeared, leaving only the moonlit waves. The following evening, Kelly told the group. Some teased her about seeing ghosts, but a couple of them admitted they'd heard local legends of a fisherman who drowned under mysterious circumstances. Some said he roamed the shores at night, carrying a lantern, searching for his lost boat. Intrigued, they stayed up late, scanning the dark shore. Around midnight, the flicker of a lantern manifested again. Determined to see the truth, they grabbed flashlights and walked down. This time, they recognized the faint outline of a man with a scruffy beard, wearing a heavy coat soaked to the waist, holding a lantern that emitted a dull glow. His eyes seemed hollow, fixed on the dark waters. One friend shouted a greeting. Slowly, the figure turned, revealing a gaunt face. Before anyone could move closer, he let out a sorrowful moan. The lantern's light wavered, then both figure and glow evaporated into the night. Terrified, they scrambled back to the cabin, locking the door. One friend insisted they pack up and leave, but others wanted to stay. They argued until exhaustion set in. Eventually, they decided to remain, but keep watch in shifts. The shift watchers occasionally glimpsed faint lights on the beach, but the figure did not reappear. On their last night, Kelly felt drawn to the water's edge. Quietly, without waking others, she wandered out. Moonlight illuminated the surface and the air felt cold. She found footprints in the damp sand, footprints that began at the water and led nowhere. Suddenly, the figure materialized a few yards away, holding that lantern. His expression was desperate, silently pleading. Kelly gathered her courage and took a few steps forward. She softly asked if he needed help. He raised the lantern, illuminating his sunken cheeks and lips parted as if forming words she couldn't hear. Then, abruptly, he turned and walked into the water. Within moments, he vanished beneath the ripples, the lantern's glow extinguished by the lake. Kelly stood there trembling, sadness gripping her. She felt as though she had witnessed someone forever reliving their final moments. She whispered a goodbye, hoping to offer some comfort. The next morning, they packed up and left. Ever since, Kelly can't look at large bodies of water without recalling that sorrowful face. She wonders if the fisherman is trapped in time, compelled to roam the shoreline, searching for closure he'll never find. Sometimes she considers returning to the same spot to see if she can help him move on, but a lingering fear keeps her away. She's left with memories of a lonely lantern glow, flickering against the backdrop of an endless lake. Story 10, The Abandoned Hotel Encounter. Cities grow and evolve, but sometimes old buildings are left behind like husks of the past. In a decaying part of downtown St. Louis sat a once grand hotel closed for decades. Local rumor painted it as haunted, its ornate ballroom and sweeping staircases now coated in grime and broken glass. The city planned to demolish it, but bureaucratic delays left it standing, a decaying monument of lost elegance. Brandon was an urban explorer. He loved photographing crumbling architecture. One autumn afternoon, he managed to access the hotel's fenced-off property. He squeezed through a gap, camera in hand, and stepped into the silent lobby, once lavish with chandeliers and marble floors. Vandalism and natural decay had reduced it to a sad shell. Eager to capture the haunting beauty, he moved through the corridors, snapping pictures of chipped paint and shattered mirrors. When he ventured upstairs, the atmosphere grew heavier. At the end of a hallway, he glimpsed a shape move across his line of sight. Thinking it might be another trespasser, he called out but got no reply. He continued exploring, climbing a grand staircase to the second floor. The air felt still, as though the building itself breathed in anticipation. He found the old ballroom. Sunlight peeked through cracks in boarded windows, revealing dusty chandeliers swaying slightly. Perfect for photos, he thought. As he snapped away, he heard faint music, an old-fashioned waltz faintly drifting through the stale air. The sound was distant, almost like a memory. Confused, he followed it back into the corridor. The melody led him to a set of double doors that opened into a smaller banquet hall. The music grew clearer, yet the room was empty and silent, except for his own echoing footsteps. Suddenly, a scraping sound came from behind. He spun around to see a door at the far end close on its own. Unsure what was happening, he approached the door. Slowly, he pushed it open, revealing a short hallway leading to another staircase. That's when he noticed footprints in the dust. Several sets, some small like a child's, some elegantly shaped like women's heels, all leading upward. He had heard ghost stories, but never encountered anything so tangible. Heart pounding, he climbed the narrow steps. At the top, he emerged into a corridor with peeling wallpaper. He noticed a warm glow from one of the rooms. Curiosity overcame fear. He stepped inside to find a lounge area, furniture covered in sheets. A single antique lamp burned softly in the corner, even though the building had no electricity. Startled, he raised his camera, but the lens fogged, refusing to focus. Then in the corner of his eye, he saw a faint figure, a woman in a vintage hotel uniform. Her hair pinned neatly, eyes fixed on him. Before he could speak, the lamp flickered out. When it came back on, she was gone. Brandon tried to remain calm, though his hands shook. He sensed a presence all around, as if multiple unseen eyes watched him. Feeling compelled, he retraced his steps back to the ballroom. The air was icy. He saw silhouettes drifting across the dance floor like echoes of a long-forgotten gala. A swirl of intangible bodies swayed to that silent waltz. Then, as though synchronized, all movement paused. He felt every shadowy figure turn to face him in unison. His fight-or-flight instinct kicked in. He sprinted toward the main stairs, hearing whispers bouncing off the walls, voices in hushed tones. Something brushed against his shoulder, a light touch that made him cry out. By the time he reached the lobby, it felt like the building was groaning in protest. Doors slammed shut around him, debris trembled. He rushed outside, gulping fresh air in relief. Over the next few days, Brandon developed his film. The pictures from before the second floor were normal, decaying halls, broken windows. But as soon as he reached the frames from the upstairs lounge, every shot showed swirling light anomalies, faint outlines of figures and orbs. The final image, taken in the ballroom, displayed a full-bodied silhouette in the center of the floor, arms raised as though holding a dance partner. He tried to share these photos, but many people dismissed them as doctored. He knew the terror he experienced was real. A month later, the city finally tore the old hotel down. Some say they saw ghostly guests crowding the windows just before the wrecking ball hit. Brandon wonders if tearing the building down simply released those trapped energies, scattering them across the city. The remnants of that day still haunt his nightmares. Even now, whenever he passes the vacant lot, he can almost hear the ghostly echo of waltz music drifting on the wind, a sorrowful reminder of a past that refuses to stay buried. I hope you found these stories as haunting and spine-chilling as I did. Let me know which part of these 10 terrifying true tales you found the most terrifying in the comments. And while you're here, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to Whispering Reapers. Stay safe out there, everyone. You never know what horrors might lurk just around the corner.